Castlevania Rondo of Blood is a platform adventure video game developed by Konami for the PC Engine Super CD-ROM 2 system. It is set in the fictional universe of Castlevania series, where the protagonist, Richard Belmont, 93. The game was remade for the Super Nintendo as Castlevania 2008. The original game was released for the Wii Virtual Console, serviced in Japan and North America, and the PAL regions in the most challenging and most enjoyable video game series in history, and probably one of my favourite games to portray Dracula in a more serious way for fans of the older films, compared to other games where you would just stake him with a pencil sharpener and then move on to the next bigger and better boss fights. The game puts you straight into the action with no bullshit. You are forced to learn every single button and what they're used for, so straight away you're fucked if you're not used to these type of games. Side-scrolling kiss my fucking ass with banging you into a corner. Zombies are fucking annoying, but the worst of all of the enemies are bats and Medusa heads. They are the most annoyingest enemies in the game. They can kill you instantly by zooming past you like they got shot out of Dracula's arse or something, sending you straight back to the beginning to die all over again. But enough of my bitching. There are some redeeming qualities to this game, like the music is just awesome, of 8 bits of kick ass and shut the fuck up. The atmosphere just screams Bram Stoker style, with its dark and creepy monsters. Every little note of music is a sign that this is going to be a tough ride to hell. In the beginning of the prologue, you go against a creepy ass Dr. Zeus looking guy. It's awesome, with the sound of thunder and lightning in the background. It's creepy on a night time with just the flashing lights to keep you company. Hell, even the first 2 bosses in stage 1 and 2 are the most toughest enemies in the game. The only sign that you have release is when you actually see them enemies come against them enemies, especially the werewolf. The first time I've ever seen a werewolf portrayed in a game and look awesome was in Castlevania Rondo of Blood. I really enjoyed this boss fight, even though it's one of the toughest enemies in the game. I found that later stages they have tough bosses, but not as tough as this one. You're constantly mashing the buttons for dear life. This what makes the game even more better, but what makes the game even more stranger is how pork chops are your best friends. They give you health, whilst hearts give you a special move called the crushing sub-weapon, something like that. So I guess I'll go into the sub-weapons and talk about them for you. So at the very start of the game you have a whip. Like most of the Castlevanias, you start off with a whip, but what if you wanted a stronger whip? There is a sub-weapon called the fire whip. It's a giant fire whip that costs about 15 hearts once used in the sub-weapon. The damage to enemies is very strong and it reaches over most of the screen. And yes, hearts deplete once you use sub-weapons specials. Stupid, but it's a very good concept to this game instead of using pork chops. Also, there is a backflip and it doesn't deplete any hearts at all, and it is very useful to perform. All you have to do is press the jump button twice quickly. This move is very useful at dodging enemy attacks and very good for getting quick escapes from bosses once you're in their fucking grasp for a bear hug. So the very first weapon you can get is the knife, and it only costs 1 heart for Richard to use. It throws the knife straight out in front of him and he throws 3 of them. It causes relatively weak damage, but they travel extremely fast, so they are very useful against birds, bats and Medusa heads. So I recommend picking these ones up if you know what stage you're on and you know you want to get past them very quickly. So the second sub weapon you can get is the axe, and it only costs 1 heart to throw, and it throws straight out in front of him in an arc sort of way, causing a decent amount of damage to anything it touches. Item Crush causes Richard to float up and produce a circle of axe damage in the circle to normal enemies, then normally just throwing it normally, I should say. So just throw it normally, I recommend. So the next sub weapon is the cross, and it only costs 1 heart to throw. The cross that flies forward and returns like a boomerang, it causes a decent amount of damage and can hit up to 2 enemies at a time. Its item crush causes the screen to be bombarded with large crucifixes at a cost of 15 hearts. This is probably the most useful item crush in the entire game. There's also a stopwatch that uses about 5 hearts, and some enemies are slowed down considerably. It doesn't work on some of the larger enemies, and definitely doesn't work on all the bosses. Pretty useless really. Its item crush causes a circle of clocks which attacks enemies at a time. Cost of 30 hearts. The clocks cause a lot of damage, but like Maria's dragon item crush, it uses far too many hearts and it's not very useful, and I haven't found it at all in the entire game. So yeah, that's one of them that I haven't found yet, as well as the Holy Bible. At the cost of 3 hearts, Richard throws a Bible that swirls around him, causing damage to anything it hits. Its item crush causes a circle of Bibles that fly forward at the cost of 10 hearts. The Bibles are in a circle and causes relatively good amount of damage. Next up is Holy Water, a relatively useless fucking sub-weapon to use against bosses, but very effective against single enemies, spatting across the screen and causing damage to any enemy that is near. It is not a bad weapon, but it is bad going against bosses with it, and it costs about 3 hearts if you use the special crushing. But if you use normal, just throw it out normally, it does relatively good damage against single enemies. As for bosses, it is useless, a waste of a sub weapon. I do not recommend this one. I always recommend the axe. This game is more of a love letter to older Castlevania fans, whilst it introduces a classic style to more modern gamers. If you haven't already purchased the Requiem collection for the PS4, I recommend you do. Fans of the earlier Castlevania releases should feel right at home with Rondo Blood. It doesn't stray too far from traditional gameplay elements found in the 8 and 16-bit releases. The majority of your tasks will be platforming your way through the game's many levels and using your whip to take down many enemies that come in your way. Most people who grew up in the 90s gaming will have played at least 1 or 2 of the Castlevania games. Unarguably one of the most famous and laundered franchises in history, Konami's branching multi-protagonist series has been around since the days of the NES, and such comes from a time before developers started taking it easy on gamers in an effort to appeal to more broader spectrum. Back in the 90s, gaming was a gauntlet and you were either good enough or you weren't. Whilst the Castlevania franchise was never classed as one of the absolute toughest games, it's still a tough game to play, and probably more enjoyable gameplay as well. There's a lot more classic style games from the NES that are being released onto the virtual console of the Wii, but not many have been released for the PS4. You can find 8-bit games like Mickey Mouse and stuff like that, but you can't find many Castlevania games. The franchise is long since dead, since the 90s, or since Symphony of the Night has been released. It's long once dead, but it is back now with the Netflix series being really good, but strays away from the actual story most of the time. It's still a very good game to play, and I do recommend playing this game if you want to get back into the Castlevania games. There is 2 collections out now. There's Requiem and We All Want to Play. I watched AVGN play it, the nerd, Angry Video Game Nerd. I've seen him play it and it looked real good, and I do want to play Dracula X, which is the port that we got, but this is a Japan release of Rondo. So yeah, just go and check it out. It's on PS4. If it's in America, I don't know how much it costs, but for £15 you get 2 great games, Rondo Blood and Symphony of the Night. So
can you deal with that? Brutality. It's game over, man.